this song calls on the spirits to come so that we can have that understanding. Be wish.
Well, according to the First Nations Regional Health Survey, 1 in 5 of our First Nations citizens have diabetes. That's 4 times greater than the Canadian average.
Diabetes is so prevalent in our communities. There's not a single family that hasn't been touched by diabetes, either our parents, our siblings, our friends, our neighbors. And more so, a lot of young children are being diagnosed with diabetes.
We are dancing for life. We are dancing for the children. We can feel the spirit of our people as we dance in the sun.
When I was 8 years old, I was going blind in my left eye, and people didn't really know in our community what was happening to this little girl. I had gained an enormous amount of weight over the course of the summer, 2 months, and that was over 40 pounds. And I was diagnosed with type 2 diabetes at that early age. And I was hospitalized, and everyone was praying for myself at that time. And my dad and my uncle had to bring in the traditional medicine and had to go underground to get it into the hospital. And that arrested my sight. When I was in the hospital with all the glucose tolerance tests that are being done back then, that's when they diagnosed me as type 2 diabetes. I was the first known case in our community, and people were devastated, but I think other people were probably living with diabetes back then. That was in 1959. It's just that they probably weren't diagnosed. If you give in to a disease, then you live with that disease. And no, I was going to live with it, but I was going to do good things while I'm living with it. And it's now 51 years living with diabetes. I think I'm the oldest person that has diabetes in this day and age. And what we can do is to work with the people to take control, be self-managing, and to live a good, healthy lifestyle.
We have to change the way we think about healthcare. And there's a couple of areas I think that we have to concentrate on. One is knowledge. We have to change how we think about how we're going to move forward with education and health.
It was through the National First Nations Diabetes Working Group through the Assembly of First Nations. They asked if I would be their person to work on this project of a DVD. And the purpose of the working on a DVD, people already know what diabetes is. We have to teach our people how to live a good, long life with diabetes. We're going to be walking through my life, and I am quite honored that you're here to Walk with me. In the stages of this medicine wheel walk, you'll see with the quilt that my cousin Dudley's sister made for me, she made it as it is portrayed on the screen. The white area signifies the elder stage, the last stage of our life. And usually in the medicine wheel, in the sweat lodge, that's the northern door. That's where the elders sit. And in the yellow part, the second area is usually the eastern doorway where you have your lodge, and that's where the sun comes up. And then in the south is the red doorway where the new and young children, if you have that opportunity to sit in the sweat lodge, that's where they would sit. And the black door there is the hottest, the western door. That's the hottest place to sit in the sweat lodge, and that's the adult stage. You really get really, really hot in there. So those are the areas of the medicine wheel. What we're going to do today is show you how to live with diabetes. So in the areas here, we'll have the introduction, the impacts, living with diabetes as a child, adolescent changes, adult stage, and early grandparenting stage, and mentoring as an elder, and then the closing area. This beautiful scene of a sunset is where I'm from, at Ajudana, Stony Point. My trailer's right up there at the lake at Stony Point. We have the traditional name as Ajudana, and you would just love it. It's nice, warm water, and it shows. But the environment and the food nowadays is contaminated. Living in an area of a reservation where our traditional lands are no longer for hunting, fishing, and trapping. We're all scrunched into a short area shared with another reserve. And in the past, the environment and food sources were at a pristine level, where everything was clean and there was no abuse in the food or the environment. Today we're living with contamination, and we're also living on reservations, which limits the ability to hunt, fish, and gather for our traditional foods and our lifestyle. But still, we really like to focus on eating traditional foods, for we see that as a good medicine. No additives, preservatives, especially in the health area. We have treaty number 6, the medicine chest clause, which we focus on. Okay, and the laws and the value systems, well, we're bringing them back. We are creating our own health law and focusing on that, and that'll be what our children will be living with. Here is my mom and dad. Mom and dad had 12 children. 2 died at birth, and I'm in the middle, but one of the younger girls. Our impacts that my mom and dad had is, of course, being placed on a reservation and then having that jerked out from underneath you. My dad was a bulldozer operator from Stony Point, and my mom is an impact of the residential school system. She went to Mush Hole at Mount Elgin near Muncie there, Muncie and Chippewa and Oneida, and that's where she went. Not to focus on the harms and anything that happened at residential school, but my mom could cook anything. She could sew anything. And you know, that's what I admire about people that did go to residential school. You could do whatever had to be done. And that is what she taught us. This is what I call my nerdy stage. This is adolescence. These are the only pictures too, because it was a hard thing to go through. The left side is in grade 9 and the other one's in grade 11. And everybody had Batman glasses back then, because they all, that was what was provided. Depression is a part of diabetes. And back then, it was unknown about the mental health area, the mental wellness of a person. And it took a good year to overcome the depression and not knowing what it was. And people living with diabetes today experience depression. Depression made me feel like I was sad, made me feel that maybe life didn't have a purpose. And I dealt with meetings with the elders at that time, and they helped me come out of that. One of the elders was my auntie, and all she had to say was one phrase that really stuck with me, and that was about laugh and the whole world laughs with you, and you cry alone.
The way that we have an outlook on life of body, mind, and spirit, that we grow that way. So it's like 3 legs in the inside of our body. And if your body is dysfunctional, then it's the other 2 parts that have to help support you in your life. And if you've only got the mental part inside of your life, then it can go into anguish and everything else because it doesn't have the spiritual part. So having those cultural components and will help you live a better life. But if you don't have the spiritual content of your ceremonies, and then you lose that support. So it's hard to stand when you only have body and mind. So you really need that cultural component of your spirit in order to help sustain you through life.
There's stresses in our lives from work, there's stresses in our lives from school, there's stresses in our lives from almost everything that you can think of, even, playing hockey or doing volleyball. People want to be the best that they can be, but that's a stress. And so if people knew how to relieve stress from their lives, I think people would be far better off. And meditation really does help. In the morning and at night, I would see my dad sitting in the eastern doorway, the eastern window of our house, and he would do his meditation. And we really didn't know that was meditation, but Dad would sit there before breakfast and before supper, or sometimes after supper, and he would sit there, and he would be sitting laid back, and he would sit there for a good half hour. And we used to kind of get caught up there. We'd sit and we would wait until he's ready to talk, but that's what our dad did. And it's until just most recently that we were informed about transcendental meditation. And I thought, if this helps people living with diabetes, I want to know all about it. Now that I've been living away from Mom and Dad for a long, long time, I find that in my home, I also have a recliner chair that is in the eastern doorway, which is the eastern window. And every morning and every night, I start off and end that way. Well, here we go into this good part of my life. It was getting married, getting educated, nursing, and living with diabetes, family and community. I met this man from Walpole Island who I married. He had blue eyes. And we had 2 children. There's Kelsey and Chesney there. They're 6 years apart. And there they are as babies. Chesney's on the left and Kelsey's on the right. Living with diabetes is, as well, you have to be really, really self-controlled. And there's my baby, my grandbaby. Come on, Beth. Here she is. Having children, having babies, you have to be really, really watching your glucose levels. During the course of both my pregnancies, I was also watched very closely for what they call gestational diabetes, where my blood sugars could have gone very, very high or very, very low. So now with the second generation, my daughter, she was also watched very closely for gestational diabetes.
When I was pregnant, I attended the Exercise and Pregnancy Lab. It was a study that was created for watching, like exercising while you're pregnant and watching for gestational diabetes. And they had requested a lot of Aboriginal women to participate in the study because diabetes is so high in our communities. And how I found out about it was through flyers when I was attending at the doctor's office. It's a SOHAC site in London, Ontario. And so I called and signed up, and what they did was they would record your blood sugar levels, take your blood sugar before you would walk, and you walk on a treadmill. They would time you every time, and you see how far you could go. And then after you walked, they would test your blood sugars after. And pretty much all of the time, you would see a dramatic change from your blood sugar levels before and after. Say you would walk before, or they would test your blood sugars before and say it would be high, like 7 or something. And then after you would walk, it'd always bring it down, like say to 4 or 5, right down to the bottom of the average normal rate. And so during that, I had to attend the exercise and pregnancy lab. Why I felt it was so important for me was because I had diabetes in both sides of my family history. My mother was diagnosed with diabetes at an early age, and my grandmother on my father's side, and my brother is now diabetic, and just all over in my family and in the community. So I thought it was the best thing for me to do.
In the pre-elder stage and menopause age, time, era, you have to be really, really careful, because in menopause time, you could be having your hot flashes, or you could be having your high sugar glucose levels come up. So an important note to always be on the watch for high glucose levels or low glucose levels, or it could be menopause itself. When I was in my early 50s, my doctor had told me, you've been living with diabetes for very, very long. And what we like to do as you are entering your 5th and 6th decade of your life, there's a certain regime that we want you to get accustomed to doing. First of all, we would like to see that you have annual eye checkups, because living with diabetes, sometimes your eyes will fluctuate, and not only that, being over 40, you will probably require help for reading and things like that. So number 1 will be your eyes, annual checkups for that. And number 2, because the impacts of diabetes is your heart, your sight, and your kidneys. For the heart, they will put you on a low dosage of aspirin so that your blood will be thin and you will circulate much better by having thin blood. And for the kidneys, to protect your kidneys, they will put you on an ACE inhibitor, which is found in the medication.